Okay, this one is still connected to rights. It's quite important to explain this component of how rights have been extinguished, I guess, through the capacity of creating order followers. Now, before I go ahead, I just wanted to credit Mark Passio again, because a lot of this information I've taken from his presentation, except the way he presented. It's going to be too long, so I needed to cut it down and make it shorter. So let's make my own slides. And some of them I have pinched. So Mark, I do remember you saying that you don't mind if people use your slides. So I'm going to hold you to that. All right, so here we go. Order following. Order following is a fear response. Fear is what suppresses the expansion of consciousness to the degree required to live in harmony with one's natural state of being. So fear of missing out, otherwise known as reward, is the most insidious method to suppress one's spiritual fortitude, as the seduction of the dopamine release in the brain is too powerful to refuse for many. Now, before I go on, I just wanted to note your attention to the nappies these guys are wearing, right? So these men and women are supposedly meant to be constables, and we know they're not, but let's just pretend they are, right? So that's a position of courage, right? A constable is someone who understands natural law and that there's no such thing as a ruler over anyone else, right? So why on earth are they wearing a nappy on their face, right? Why are they stopping themselves from breathing fresh air? The only way they could do that is if they're in fear. And what are they in fear of? In fear of losing their job. What's that such a big deal, right? Because the system of dependence has been set up. So these men are more scared than you and I, and women, should I say. And if you have a think about what a nappy is, right? A nappy is for someone who doesn't have bodily control. Because, you know, who wears it? Usually infants and old people. So if they don't have bodily control, they're putting it over their mouth, right? What are they telling you? They're not in charge of their own bodies. So they're telling you everything. So this is the thing that really needs to be understood about how fear is the center of everything that's destructive. So now I'm going to bring up the next slide and just take as long than I thought, actually. So let me see it. All right, here we go. Order following is the product of disintegration. So when I say disintegrate, is to disintegrate all aspects of yourself. And we're very complex and we've got multiple aspects. And when we integrate them all, we're in balance. That's what that means. So it requires suppressing of conscience. That means extinguishing the eternal spirit's divine flame of care for self through the care of others. So the way we care for ourselves is by expressing care to others, because our well-being automatically gets a big boost, probably twice as much, when we act in the service of caring for others. So our self-esteem goes up twice as much as anything that we've done, and this self-esteem that goes up for them. So order following requires the intellect to not only oppose intelligence. So a lot of people get confused between intellect and intelligence, and I can't tell the difference between the two. So intellect is just your capacity to function and do the basic stuff, you know, understand how to do math problems, you know, analytical things. That's your intellect. Right? Intelligence is that heart center, you know, that deeper knowing of what's required to live in peaceful, harmonious coexistence. You'll hear me say that word to death. I'm sure you've already heard it enough. Hence domination of left brain function, meaning one is out of balance and in opposition to their natural state of being. So when you're following orders, you are always out of balance. You are never in your natural state of being. And that's a state of hypervigilance. That's the terrible part of it. The problem is that the conscience cannot be programmed. So you really got to think about that, right? Because as much as you push it down with alcohol and all these other, you know, destructive behaviors, it still keeps coming up. That's why you got to keep drinking or taking drugs or, you know, whatever other behaviors you've chosen to use to try and suppress it. Nor suppressed, hence the natural consequence of PTSD. Now, if you think about it, right, the military and the police, they've got the highest numbers because they're the ones who are doing the biggest breaches, you know, when it comes to, you know, their fellow men and women, what they do to them. So naturally, they're going to suffer that. And this is the depth of how unconscious these people are, right? They're just everyday people like you and I, but they put on these uniform, and that's it. they just shut that part of themselves off and they just become a whole different being. And then, unfortunately, because the conscience just doesn't take a holiday, it's always there, they end up paying the price in the worst, most possible way. Unfortunately, we all pay the price with them. That's the tragedy of the whole thing. So let's look into how this actually operates. How do you get someone that's a sentient being, who has capacity for care and consideration, compassion, to actually shuttle that off? Well, you need to program it, right? So these ancient psychologists, they know all this, right? Those ones who give out the orders. And they've been using this for centuries, and it's a fail-safe technique. So let's look into it. So the 4 fail-safe techniques established by ancient psychologists that create the conditions necessary to override conscience to ensure denial of personal responsibility. Now, if you're wondering who these ancient psychologists are, they're just the priest class. That's all that the priests really are. They're just ancient psychologists. Hopefully that's nothing new to you, but if it is, have a think about it. All right, so the first one is separation or isolation, right? It's to separate you out from your community. You think about that when they take you to boot camp or, the police academy. You're totally taken somewhere else, right? And you can't have that regular contact. Even footy clubs, right? When they do their training sessions, they go off and do something separate and they take you away somewhere else, right? And you're not in touch with who you usually are. Same structure. Then you've got conformity. Then there's indoctrination through repetition. Now I want you to think about advertising. What does that do, right? It's constantly repeating. They know that works, over and over and over, because you need to repeat a lie. That's just how it works. Otherwise, people would never even take it in, because they just dismiss it straight away as soon as they hear it. They go, that doesn't work. But you say it enough times, eventually it does. And then you've got trauma. So that's sort of the 4 key ways. So I'm just going to come back in a second. Just bear with me. Well, let's look into number 1, separation or isolation. So physical separation from the rest of the community. So obviously the police, they go to the academy, the military, they have that basic training. And like I said earlier, you've got your teams that take you off in their camps. So then they need you to disidentify with the community. That's why they separate you, right? And so then you're going to be more receptive to the alternate state of being that they're trying to get you to take in as a reality. Now they're creating a new mental family, right? So in your mind, you've got a new family that you belong to, that you're dependent on. So now they've created the us versus them. It's really important. That's at the center of it. This is splitting, right? When they split you and they make you see different types of people, categorize you, categorize others. You belong here, you don't belong there. That kind of idea starts to really penetrate into you. Then once they do that, then they demonize the outsiders, because you belong to this new family. So everyone else who's not part of your family, so if you're in the military or police, they're civilians, right? They're not part of your family. You are now your own exclusive club, right? And then you've got your own separate exclusive language. You think about that, right? The military's got their own, the police have their own. In corporates, you have your own corporations. In like the medical profession, they have their own. The legal profession, they have their own. They all have their own language, right? So this is your new family that you belong to, because you are disidentified with others in that moment. And then, it's really common for the military to come up with terms like civilian pukes, really derogatory, derisive terms, So there's hatred now. They're teaching you to absorb hatred as a natural state of being. Really, really clever techniques to actually get you to step away from your divine flame of care and consideration. Now, I'm going to carry on with this is just going to have to be part 1 because it's going to go far too long. So I'm going to pause it here and I'll come back with part 2. And I'll see you guys shortly. All right.